So the first thing is I'm Ben Mendelsohn. I'm the president of the Interactive Television Alliance. It's a nonprofit trade association of 130 companies developing next generation television. My panelists here, they come from different areas from within the technology content media world. And I'm just going to have them, the simplest thing for me to do is have them tell a little bit about each themselves, and we'll just go down the line. And then afterwards, we'll have a little conversation. So, Robert, you're first.
Thank you, Ben. I'm Robert Watts. I'm the co-founder and executive producer at Lightsail VR. We're a live-action cinematic content company and full production company. We've done a number of branded and commercial works for companies like Google, GoPro, SAP, the National Parks Service, and we're also developing a slate of original series, basically in VR and MR, and the first of which is coming out for Halloween. It's an interactive live-action horror narrative. It's got 56 different locations, kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure, that we're very excited about.
I know where my Halloween party is going to be. That's great. That makes it much cheaper. Wait, go ahead.
Right. My name is Bastiaan den Breber. I'm co-founder of Samo VR, and we focus on the top end of the music industry and the sports industry, deal making, distribution and monetization. So typically our deals are shaped in a way that's 6 or 12-month campaign, everything AR, VR that's relevant for the music artist, complementary to everything else they do already in daily life, let's say in the 2D world with concerts, dropping singles, performances, and the whole thing.
There we go. Seth.
Thanks, Ben. Seth Skolnick. I'm COO of a company called Live Planet. We are, unlike most of my colleagues here, we're on the technology side of the immersive media world. We are introducing in the market a full end-to-end integrated system to help make it easier for creators to capture, manage, and distribute their content, whether it's to 360 platforms, any of the immersive headsets that are in market or coming to market. It's really a foundational technology play versus a piecemeal solution. So it's something we believe the industry has been waiting for, and we're excited to bring it to market very soon.
Hey, Edward.
I'm Edward Button. I'm a director of photography and come be when need producer, which is frequent. Currently I'm working across traditional film and television, but also a lot of VR, AR, MR, XR,
MOUSC.
POD. But I'm currently post-works and technical learning or artist in residence, so basically doing research into different ways to create immersion and to create new forms of cinematic VR, AR, MR, all of that.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Justin Molinari. I'm the Chief Technical Officer of Otherworld Interactive, which is a interactive VR, AR content studio. We focus mainly on both mobile and high-end platforms, and we're most famous for our horror interactive experience, Sisters.
Wow. Okay, a lot of horror, a lot of
yeah,
very timely. Okay. All right. Well, the first thing, the thing that I tend to do is I'm all about the media entertainment ecosystem. And so usually, I'm going to at some point or another get into the 4 areas, which is content, distribution, technology, and advertising. So it's easy. I just go, okay, let's start with content. And say, let's start out, Robert. Sure. Talk a little bit about where you think the content is with VR and AR in terms of accessibility to the consumer. Because now you're getting into, I know that you were doing more B2B kinds of things, but now this is your first B2C project.
Yeah.
Where do you see where it is now? Where do you see where it's going to be a year from now?
Yeah,
How about that?
Sure.
That's a good conversation.
So the reason we started our company was actually because there was a distinct lack of quality content in the MR. I'm just going to say MR.
They may disagree with you.
I apologize. At the time we started Lightsail, which was about 2 years ago, I felt that most people were just putting the camera down and being like, hey, it's in 360, watch it. What do you do past 30 seconds? So there's a distinct lack of what I would say the quality content that we're all used to. There is no Game of Thrones. There's no Mad Men that you can go and see on VR right now, and my company included. And there are no series. There's no long form in the content space. So people don't have a reason to go and say to all their friends, hey, you have to go pick up a headset. You have to go watch this show that I watch. It's amazing. Like, I can't wait for the next episode to come out. And that also comes from a distribution hurdle at the moment. Oh, sorry. Distribution hurdle at the moment in the sense that there's no one-stop shop. There's not even five-stop shops. Like, you can't go to Netflix and watch VR content. You have to be like, I have to have a Daydream phone, I have to have a Pixel, I have to have a Daydream headset, and I can only watch on the Daydream store. That really limits your marketplace. So I think that that's going to evolve. Both of those problems are being tackled right now, and I think they'll evolve over the course of the next year or two.
Okay. Yeah, actually, Ed, why don't you tell us?
Yeah,
I'm going to mix it around.
We've
Yeah.
done, there have been a few series that have been done, and it's started to ink into there. But one of the problems is, as you're saying, is there's not the ability right now to get like Monday morning water cooler talk happening. It is pretty tricky. I mean, it's happening, but it's a lot slower than I think anybody hoped for. It's also incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And this is one of the, it's like, no, it's not cheaper, it's more expensive. There's not one camera, there's 9 cameras, and we're going to turn it into 3D and make it light field.
Right.
So, this is a major problem, stumbling block.
Well, but considering the front end, you're also not making that much money, so.
But the experiments are happening, we're learning, like the content is perpetually, every season has gotten better. We're learning from our mistakes, and that's what's really important right now.
Yeah. But those are valid points, but isn't the real dynamic here a little more fundamental, that we don't yet know what this medium requires, at least from a storytelling standpoint or an experiential storytelling standpoint. So while there's a myriad of platforms and it's expensive to produce and it's hard. It's like early web days of hand coding HTML and having to code for each different browser, and things look crappy on one but good on another. But more fundamentally, the notion of storytelling, I think, is presupposing that we can do what has come before. And I think there have been unfair comparisons that, okay, in linear we've moved through all these platforms where it's been a screen, it's a screen, it's a screen. And early web days, there was this big push to create original content for the web, and most of that couldn't find a native form that made sense for the web. Ultimately, you had social media and other things that have taken hold. And today, if you look back at the web or mobile web, it's really about just another distribution platform for linear storytelling, albeit with on-demand and binge and other things that impact creative. We're in a whole different beast world here where it's potentially an empathy engine. It's a fully immersed sense engine. And the notion of a season or what long form is, in some ways we're trying to jury rig a square peg into this. And I think the natural dynamics that have to take place are what are taking place now. The expectations have to be more measured, and we have to allow the natural form to emerge through experimentation. And I think these conferences and just the press in general are putting a metric in front of this medium that is probably an unfair comparison. And we'll look back at some point in the future, see a form of experience that will feel natural and long held then. It will be nothing like what we're screwing around with.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, because it's very easy to generalize where the market is, but it doesn't work that way. You have to put in a lot of nuance in different ways to look at the market. So segmenting like per vertical, what is happening, and different verticals at different stages. Like there's a massive advancements in sports, live sports, for instance, and a lot of, I think 80% of what's happening is not even visible for the audience right now, because it's expensive to create at any level, right? Even if you segment the market to user-generated content or independent content or AAA content or every shade of gray in between, there is a multiple on the cost. So everything takes more preparation, it's more difficult to finance, and it's more difficult to create. So there's a lot of stuff in different verticals in production that is not even visible to most people. Like for my specific kind of, because I focus on the high end of the market, even before we get a signature, there's a 6 to 12 month lead time. It's getting shorter because we're starting to learn what works and what doesn't work. And then we have to start production cycles, which is easily months up to a year. And then we start dropping. And I think that's probably true for a lot of different verticals. So there's a lot in the making, but the market is extremely nascent. So it's nice that there is this massive expectation of what it should be. And then there's this, it's easy to sort of rationalize it or talk it down like, oh, we're not living up to expectations, but it's unstoppable. billions of dollars from every angle are pouring into this industry, and there's a lot being created hardware-wise, software-wise, platform-wise. The creatives are pouring into the industry. So this is going to be big, and it's moving full speed in the right direction. And I think there was a correction. 2015 was sort of the hype thing. I think 2016, even the market reports, maybe except Goldman Sachs, were sort of moderating, and they were pretty spot on at some point on the hardware side, on headsets being distributed. The content side is extremely difficult, I think, to predict financially what is happening.
But it's tied to the hardware side.
This is, I think, a huge point that ties both of what you're saying together. Is you're right, but we need to be able to find ways to iterate faster. Sure. We can't take 2 years. If we take 2 years to figure out, okay, that didn't work. Right. 2 more years to figure out that didn't work, and pretty soon we're in a whole nother medium.
Oh yeah, we're going to make a lot of mistakes trying to figure it out because it is a new medium. Even in sports, in music, in film, TV, everything is new. No, I mean, we figured out little bits and pieces on what works, maybe, right? But the real stuff still has to be done.
I think also going back to Seth's point about having kind of a square peg for a round hole, I hear a lot of conversations saying, how can I bring this video or this movie experience to this? And it's kind of just thinking the wrong way. Even with video, your storytelling should be more environmental. You don't know where someone's looking. You don't know when they will look at something, but you can read back where the user will be looking at that time and change your story. So I'm excited to see what you're doing with the interactive video stuff. But from my side, which is more almost like a game development background, we have been telling stories with environments for a long time. And people even shooting video should maybe be thinking more like a theme park designer, like how can I get someone to look in this place? How can I make the story come to them? So it is a new medium, and you shouldn't be thinking, how can I make this serial television show work in VR? It's not going to work. It shouldn't work. If you want to do that, then you can just already go in VR and sit in a room like this and have a big television screen and watch it. So you can still make that content. But for VR, I think it's important to think about how the story is going to connect with somebody different in VR and better. And I think a lot of the storytellers who will do that are actually people who grew up using interactive mediums like video games and understand that language and that speak more than coming from a traditional film background. But it's exciting to see how many people in film are excited to jump into that new medium.
It occurs to me while you're talking about like the storytelling and how it affects the audience. My sense is that there's this whole question of how are people going to be consuming the content now? Are you all doing mostly things that are going to be downloaded into a device, or are you doing more experiential types of things, or both? It's like, where do you see? I'm sure you're doing all of it, but I'm curious to seeing what your priorities are, because of the obvious challenges with the devices themselves. So my sense is that Sony has its own environment, and it's of all the systems, it's relatively easy. You buy the Sony device, you already have a PS3 or PS4. You do it, but then you've got Google, which is all over the place, which is a much potentially larger audience. And then you have the potential of making places that you can go to. So why don't, I don't know, Bastian, tell me about what you're doing, if you're doing all three things, if you're doing experiential, if you're doing games, if you're also doing, where do you think it's going, where it is right now, and how do people consume the device, and where do you see it going?
I have no clue.
Good answer! That was the answer.
And honestly, anybody who says that they know, they're just lying, or they just don't know. The good thing, what we're focusing on with the music industry, is that the artists always want to reach everybody, right? They don't want to log into a platform unless Apple puts $10 million on the table. And you're like,
that changes the game.
Okay, I'll do it. And that's only temporary, by the way. So when we do a campaign, let's say for 12 months, it contains 10, 15 different pieces of content, purposely created for all of those different platforms. There's short snippets that go into social media. There's fully interactive experience that goes into location-based services. There are AR components to it for location-based activations or brand activations. There's live streaming. So it's the full package. Why? Because it's all about the fan engagement with the artist. And the fans are on all those platforms. And Is there a microphone there?
It's immersive.
Right, that's immersive.
Yeah.
Spatialized sound. Yeah.
Right.
That's how you can direct attention.
Yep.
So the thing is, you need to think through really carefully what the kind of engagement you think the fan wants, how you create it, and then which platforms you go for. And for each type of platform, obviously there are a bunch of players out in the market, so you have a choice basically. And then technology, financing, windowing, all those factors come into play. And for my business, I need to do that while the whole package returns money to investors, recoup plus a return on investment. So we make those considerations very carefully. Some of it are purely promotional to drive traffic, to get fans enthusiastic, and some of them are specifically to monetize content because it's highly premium content that fans are willing to pay for. So it's really about figuring out the whole puzzle up front before doing anything. That put things together, and every deal is different in that respect. Obviously, there are sort of red lines in them, and things become clear over time. But as the market grows, as one platform succeeds, the other falters, things change all the time. So our deal shapes change over time. Even for the couple of years that we've been into this, every time we try to take a fresh look at it.
I mean, it's definitely a technical challenge, trying to figure out what the platform will be. But the one thing from a content creation standpoint is we don't know who's going to win. We don't know what the even distribution pipeline will be, but we do know what we expect, what we want from it, right? We know we want it to be visually completely immersive. The sound should be immediate. We know what we're trying to hit. We want it to be interactive. We want it to have a response to the person. So when creating content, at least for instance, if you have to plan 6 months out, you might not know, for instance, Oculus just announced a $200 standalone headset this week. That's probably going to change the whole market. But we also know that if you're creating content for a Daydream or for a Vive, it's still going to work on that if you plan correctly. So yeah, no one knows who's going to win. No one knows how video is eventually going to work or be distributed. Is it going to be Google? Is it going to be a movie studio or something who takes the lead? But I do think from a content creation standpoint, we do know where it's headed, because we all have wanted this for a long time, or at least I have. So.
Right.
And Edward's point about iteration, I think, is key too. Maybe not planning for 2 years from now, making a 2-year project, because that's unrealistic at this point. What will it look like in 2 years? No one knows. So maybe focusing on smaller, innovative projects or things you can build upon and iterate is really important.
Yeah, because we've got to figure out the happy accidents, the things that we thought this would work, it did not work. And that's pipeline stuff. I was just talking with some guys from John, and they had a project on the new Microsoft headset, and they were just Patrick was just saying it's unbelievable. My developer spends 4 hours every morning fixing the new update, and the time drain on that, is brutal. You're just well, can we just get back to being creative here?
Right.
So some of that,
you plan for that.
Together.
You make it so it's platform compatible, right? So we'll design a piece. We'll ask the first question we're going to ask is, what's the distribution? Do you want it to be Facebook, YouTube to reach the 6 billion people who have smartphones, or are you going fully immersive, which is more interesting in my opinion, but you're only having a target audience of 20 million, say, of all the different headsets, HMDs, and then you just plan for that. So you're saying, okay, well, I'm going to have a Google version, I'm going to have a Daydream version, I'm going to have a Gear VR version, and then how can I plus it to have an Oculus version and a PS4 version and a Vive version? And then from the outset, it's going to take me a week to do all those different encodes, but at least I'll have it, and at least I'm hitting everybody, because you can do different things based on if it's a 360 video versus a game engine piece versus a headset piece. So. And we were talking about this earlier, but using a platform like Unity or Unreal have been doing a really good job of keeping up with these different headsets and mediums. So you don't have to be. It's still a huge pain in the ass. Let's be honest. Yeah. But you don't have to rewrite the whole thing every time. And that is one thing that I kind of feel bad for the people who have to work in the video medium versus the interactive medium, because it's a lot easier to update and iterate and change, because it's not this static piece that you had to go out and shoot. And on the expensive thing, it's actually in some ways cheaper in film, even in 360 video, to make the real world and people happen. But if you're trying to make something fantastic or something that isn't around in real life, it's actually pretty cheap compared to making it in a movie format. So
for me at least, I think using game engines like Unity is a huge plus, even for if you're trying to do a video style storytelling thing, because it does allow you to go to all these, someone else can do a lot of the work for you, Unity, and then it also lets you update and keep up to date and change things in the world without having to go back and re-edit your whole video or reshoot it. So
we've got
it's a
both
powerful
problems
thing.
now, because now we have stereoscopic video in Unity with interactivity, so we have to fight both.
Yeah,
But
you're
it's
just making it hard for yourself.
But it's, but it's fantastic because then you can integrate it as like in essence open source. You can integrate your own scripts. You're like, nobody's done this before, so how do we solve this problem?
Right.
Well, let's sit down and code something, and then you can reuse that tool. So in some instances, you're absolutely right. It just doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, and I think it's almost the way now that anyone can shoot something on video very cheaply, almost everyone's become an editor. I feel like in the future, and maybe this is just me as a coder, it's going to be a similar thing. If you want to create content, you might have to script a little bit. It's not that scary. Get your feet wet, get into it, because it really will help you do a lot of these things, especially when it comes to working with virtual reality or augmented reality headset. Having a little bit of knowledge there goes a really, really long way to being able to bring your vision to life without relying on someone like me.
Yeah, Seth, tell me, because you come from you create systems, but one of your distinctions is that you do have a camera and you do have hardware. How does all of this like constantly dynamic environment affect decisions that you make with the camera and how the camera is being used by the content people?
Yeah, I'd actually, I'll deflect off the camera into something more broad. The Live Planet system, we have a camera that's addressing some market gaps, particularly around capturing natural stereoscopic VR in a very easy, simple way. We stitch in real time on board the camera, we encode on the camera, we bounce it up to our cloud, and we can live stream right to multiple headsets directly with minimal fuss. And that's a more central theme I want to hit here, which is you've all just described a lot of pain. And as creatives, you shouldn't have to deal with unnecessary pain. You should be dealing with talent giving you agita, not your technology. And one of our goals at Live Planet is to try to obfuscate a lot of the challenges of, particularly with respect to immersive video, less so on the rendered side, but to allow it to get out to all the multitude of headsets and platforms that are out there, and we've just spoken of more that are coming to market, and they all have individual quirks. You have to worry about specificity on each of them. Our cloud is one that takes in content, whether from our camera or other cameras, transcodes, makes all the adjustments necessary to bring it down to the multiple platforms and headsets. And then, because it's not just the headset, but we believe in the streaming model as the linear world has moved to, and we'll facilitate download, but live events and other types of experience warrant a streaming construct. So we're working with some adaptive viewporting technologies that we've developed to, in essence, bring a high quality experience, call it a 35 megabit per second visual experience in stereo, 4K stereo, and bring it down over an LTE connection to your phone-based headset and allow you to have a very high quality experience today and not worry about where the networks are going tomorrow. So that's an example of what we're trying to do on the technology side to get rid of some of the pain of worrying about, I can only get to this audience, or I can only format it in this manner in order for people to experience it. We're trying to be agnostic to the consumption channel. We're trying to be the Switzerland for purposes of allowing creators to manage their content and get it out wherever they want, use APIs, apply monetization rules, charge for their content. There's a missing link in this system in that we've talked about capture and we've talked about consumption with a headset, but there's this whole infrastructure needed in between to connect the two, and that's where we play, and that's our challenge, and it is not an easy one, but we're trying to build some very hardcore tech in full stack fashion to address it. So that's where we're going.
Which are obviously needs that all of you have that would make things easier. Yeah,
And it looks awesome.
there you go.
It really does.
There you go. That's good.
It really, I was really
Impressed.
Yeah,
Okay. Good payoff here. It's always good.
Sure you will.
Well, you know what? A lot of this, because we are talking about a nascent industry that's developing up, and I've been through that with interactive television. But we did get there, and I know that this is going to get to a point relatively soon where we'll actually be able to start making money. But my sense is that as all the different platforms are developing, figuring out the best way to have the headset and make it less cumbersome. For right now, there is a potential way of making money for companies as promotion and marketing. They don't need to have a huge amount of thing. They can say, hey, look at this really cool thing that we're doing, using this new technology, and that's worth money to them, and they'll pay for that. So I want to get more into, because we've been talking more about the direct consumer experience. I want to get now into the sort of the future economy, which really has to do with some of the sponsor-based programming, and where you have advertisers and brands connecting up with the technology. Can you each just talk, if you're not doing it yourself, talk about things that you've heard about with brands and how they're using it creatively to sort of use it as a marketing and promotional material platform, essentially.
Sure.
Because I know that's where you really started out.
I mean, we've done a number of branded projects. We just worked with the national parks to showcase the Channel Islands right out here off the coast. And I mean, the medium is very much a location-based medium. So if you never get to go out to see the Channel Islands, they took Jordan Fisher, who's a Broadway star on Hamilton, and he took us around for a tour of a park where we're hiking. So very location-based, and travel and tourism, I think, really fits. And then more on the people operations side. So we did a 3-part documentary series for Google on racial identity, where we followed a couple Googlers around, and a woman who immigrated from Madagascar to France and was the only person of color in her all-white town, and a gay man who moved from St. Louis to San Francisco and dealt with the otherness of doing that. So really, you get to be in people's shoes and experience what they see. You're sitting in this woman's living room, seeing her kids run back and forth, and having her showing the struggle with her having to explain, like, I'm a person of color, your father's not, and like, where do you lie on that? So I think it has emotional appeal, I think it has location appeal, and then advertising is very obvious, because you can take people where they don't have exclusive access, and they get to go and be there with A-level talent or places you would never be able to see.
Okay, that's great. Bastien, do you have any examples of brands, or, well, you represent music brands in a way.
Yeah, in a way, and obviously the market, is highly interesting for brands, and brands, the technology companies that are, vying for a place in this market are one of the brands, and obviously there are more the traditional consumer brands that also want to participate and enable events, be it digital or real time or a combination thereof. If I look at sort of the whole money flow in a market, you could look at it like a pyramid maybe. So for me, advertising revenues is not that relevant because the market is too nascent. There's not an individual platform that doesn't have enough people on it to generate enough advertising revenues that I even care about it. Sponsoring helps to put content on platforms that don't have a monetization option, even if they have advertising. I just cannot consider that as monetization. So sponsoring there helps. And also, there's money on the table to get the premium content locked in for a certain window of time on a specific platform, if you can consider that sponsoring. But then the foundation behind all of my deals is strategic investors, which are typically multi-billion-dollar companies that have 7-figure budgets per production available, and a combination of those to clear the initial financing for the deals, and that's the bulk of the financing that goes into the deals, and then we layer that with different forms of sponsoring. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Justin, do you have any?
Yeah, actually, I love talking about this because I think it's one of the most exciting opportunities that's not being fully used. Is that even with a lack of eyeballs, maybe when you create a branded experience in virtual reality, you kind of get a multiplicative effect in other mediums as well. So if you're a brand and you're trying to buy ad space on a website, well, wouldn't it be better to have an article written about your brand experience that someone experienced, or wouldn't it be better to have a YouTube video go viral of somebody experiencing your experience that's something you can't even pay for. So I think when we talk to people about this, it's less an argument of how many eyeballs will see this directly, as of right now. I mean, in the future, it'll be different, but is how many people will hear about this? How viral will this go by being part of this? So one thing we did is the Sisters game, which has a few million downloads now. We worked with the Blair Witch movie that came out, and we said we want to make an experience that the players actually are interested in, not just a pre-roll video trailer in VR, but let us craft a small Blair Witch experience, something that someone would want anyway. And they play it, and they're going to show to their friends, hey, check this out. Come check this out. There's actually this game I downloaded before for free, has this other horror experience tied to this movie. And that is such an amazing opportunity, because with that, people will talk about it, talk about your ad. I mean, this might not live forever, but for right now, you know, IKEA has a virtual reality experience, and you can cook Swedish meatballs in it, and I've done it. Yeah. You know, why have I done that? Because it's cool, and it's something new, and it's interesting. So I think there's a huge opportunity that's not necessarily being used beyond just things like product placement and video ads, where if you are actually paying to make an experience, that's not just money thrown into a bucket. I mean, if you also, a lot of brands have these massive, massive ad budgets. And so I always try and convince people, give us a sliver of that and see what can happen. And if there's somebody who makes a video that gets 5 million views of them playing the stupid IKEA Swedish meatballs thing, that's a much more cost-effective solution for a brand than trying to make a ad that 5 million people see on television. So
yeah, and to support that, I've seen metrics from specific VR campaigns, and on the traditional marketing metrics were beat 2 to 3x easily on those campaigns, and most of it was around brand recognition, immersion, and engagement. That was way more effective than traditional advertising.
Yeah, people like it. I mean, people hate ads, right? You mute your TV, you look away. In VR also, I mean, it's a little creepy, but we can see if they actually look at it. Where, you know, in the Blair Witch ad, we were providing metrics saying, did they stay for the whole experience? Did they look here? Did they look there? How long did they look at the witch for? You know, did they go to the website directly after that? That's a harder thing to link up, but I think, you know, it's still, you get more information than you do even from traditional advertising. And I think creatively, there's some really cool things that can be done with it. There doesn't have to be a really skeezy, you know, Coca-Cola thing, but it can be really, you can make a really interesting product that people want to do, and it can be branded, and it doesn't have to feel like an ad.
Right.
It feel fun.
But even in the music sense, you know, like as terms of what music videos were branded content, essentially. Yeah. Well, we did a 360 video Amazonic sound project for a beatboxer named Reeps One, and that piece, zero, you know, if it's not even if it's good, if it's decent, right? You know, that piece was zero marketing or push or anything, got close to 1 million views. So it's there, you know, it's clearly there. People want to look at it.
Yeah, and I remember the piece we did last year with an up-and-coming artist from a big management company here in LA. Had 80,000 fans on Facebook, started his second global tour, did a music video on one of the songs. We did a VR experience on the same song. We boosted his online fan base with 30% across the board within 10 days of releasing it. Before it was flat, after it was sort of 6-7 months later it started to flatten out again. But there was an immediate boost, and he just gained a massive fan base increase, seeing people going, and then obviously the output has to be right? It has to fit the music, it has to fit the artist. There are a lot of conditions that make it successful or not, but it's possible.
None of that's surprising. Look, we're in the novel days where this digital Hollywood, so for motion picture and television marketing, for example, this is akin to the early days of websites, and I was at a studio for those years, and you know, a few studios made sites back in 94, 95, and suddenly it was everyone had to have a website. It was something to stand out, to drive a separate conversation, an article, and it ultimately became just table stakes for the marketing activities. I guess the question here is, now you're seeing VR experiences, and to a lesser degree AR experiences related to primarily theatrical releases, as well as some TV season launches. And will that become just part of the marketing machine moving forward? Probably, particularly if the costs can come down and people find a way to logically tie it to the environment, the story, the world that the IP is trying to create. So today we are 1995 with respect to websites now being VR. So articles are written about them, people go to festivals to experience them. And it's not particularly surprising. It's helping to develop new skills. It's allowing the sponsors to be integrated into it. So whether it sustains, though, I think is a question.
I mean, we call it in-universe original content. We did a Paranormal Activity spot for the digital release of the 6th movie, and that went viral. That got 10 million views between YouTube and Facebook, and it was not that expensive to produce for Paramount, and I think that it totally should be part of the ongoing media and advertising strategy for all media going forward, because it's simple. Like, people crave more content. I mean, it goes back to that very first question. It's the Game of Thrones effect is, what do you do to get people to tune back in? You know, it's not pigeonholing 2D cinema into 360. It's how do you get people talking, that water cooler talk that you brought up.
So do you see the production of such, if they become normalized, just becoming part of an agency's arsenal and specialized shops get absorbed? And
or the studio itself, you know, combining both. I think BTS is interesting for a certain audience and a certain point of view, but really it's got to be its own narrative that you're like, oh, that was cool. I didn't get to see that in the movie, and I got to see the VR experience, and that kind of changed how I thought about it. So more than like flipping pizzas around like in the Terminator or the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle one. You know?
But it's also expanding in a way too. It's looking what's so great about AR coming along now. It's expanding outside of just these fields. Like this last weekend in New York at FOST, I saw Mr. Robot's got a new project this year. They did a VR project last year, but this year they've got an Amazon Alexa project.
Oh, nice.
Because there's Amazon in one of the storylines. There's a thing with the Alexa and how it's probably listening in, you know. But they did a whole project based, and you go on your Alexa and you say, Alexa, take me to whatever, and you can play this.
Right.
This experience, but it's all via box. So it's really exciting in that it's not just limited to another screen. But I think agencies and places will have it's like another department, as if it was another screen.
Yeah. Well, one production reality they'll have to tackle, though, is particularly on the visual output front, they'll have to get more involved with the production early on. They're going to have to plan these campaigns, these experiences, unless they're going to go render them later.
Right.
They're going to have to be on set. They're going to have to conceive of them early. They're going to have to impact set design, particularly if you're going 360. So there will be expense there. There will be a skill set expansion, and there might be some hurdles to get over in terms of the folks who just want to produce the show and have budgets and deadlines to hit, to have this integrated in. So there'll have to be a bit of work on that.
Absolutely, because particularly if you look at existing live events, they're planned far ahead. There's like a formula, just like with film and TV, there's a formula, and the formula breaks as soon as you start doing 360 in VR. And if you start with the existing formula and try to mold it a little bit so that you can do 360 or VR, you're not going to end up with a great production. That's what you see now with live streaming a lot for music concerts. You know, you have a 360 view, you look around a few times, but 90% of the time you'll be looking. But you also want to see, for instance, the telescopic view that you usually get from the big telescope cameras, which I think Radiant Images has done a great solution, where they take that image and place it within the VR view, and it all stitches automatically and it's live streamed, the two of them combined. So we're still exploring and figuring out how to really provide what the end user really wants. But I think and like you said, for any of those things, you have to start from scratch. If you do it as an add-on, it's not going to be great, guaranteed. Plus, you're going to run into a lot of operational, technical, financial problems. If you start from scratch and design it with 360 VR in mind, you potentially end up with something great.
Yep.
I think what everyone's saying is just it has to be taken seriously. You can't, right? You can't just say, oh yeah, we'll do some VR stuff. We'll do a little AR.
It's not a
thing.
behind-the-scenes crew.
Yeah. It needs to be taken seriously, and that's I think in the future maybe the studios are the ones who do it for themselves. But right now it's an exciting time to be a smaller independent shop, or all of us having our own companies, because they do need expertise from the outside, and to take it seriously and to do it correctly. And just to do something well, you have to be thinking about it as its own project as well. How will it tie in? Sure, but it is its own project.
Yeah. Now I started thinking about the fact is that there is a strong initial community of people who are all committed to this and who know everything about it. And it's getting to be in the small, like 2, 3, 5 million in terms of people who can access it. But there's also the sense that we're at a point where we got to get some more people really into it and understanding it out, beyond just, oh, there's something in VR, AR, but they've actually never experienced it. And, like I just went down to, Century City just completely redid itself, and it's a whole new environment, and it's still, they're still working, it's pretty cool. But I know that there's a couple of initiatives that are happening that are essentially demo session places. There's a company that's working with theater chains. So on their off hours where they have low stuff, they're doing VR demonstrations and content to people who otherwise wouldn't put a thing on their head normally, and they'd be able to do it. And I think at Tesla, which is great. You go to the mall and you can actually, you're not planning on going there, but you walk in because it's there. It's like, why wouldn't there be a place that has a really rich VR experience that they can come in and experience that? I just want to go through and start a conversation about whether you know of people who are doing it, if you know some really cool implementations of that, or how do you see yourself going out and getting people who really aren't into it yet to really understand it and experience it?
Well, I think the Void, if you haven't tried the Void, I would highly recommend it. They're going to opening one at downtown Disney. That's a complete game engine experience that's untethered. So you walk around with a backpack laptop, and you've got the headset on, and there's a Ghostbusters one in Madame Tussauds in New York, and they do 4D technology. So you've got rumble floors, you've got air blowing on you, and then spoilers, you defeat the marshmallow monster and you smell marshmallows, and so it really sells it, and it's a fun experience. But I think it's definitely going to be a stratified world. I think you're going to have theme park versions of VR, you're going to have those installation-based versions, you're going to have the movie theater versions, the IMAX VRs of the world, and then you're going to have the room scale ones at home and the headsets. So we need to be thinking about the MR as mediums, as delivery mechanisms, and not as like, I'm doing a VR piece. It's like, well, are you doing a horror piece? How long is it? How are people going to experience? You need to think about how do people enter it, just like at Disneyland. How do you get into the ride? What's the ride like? And what's the experience after you leave? And that has to be across all these different stratifications.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of how to access it, I mean, get a simple headset for at home. Keep it in the living room right next to the TV, and instead of putting on Netflix for a change, just put on the headset and see what's new out there. I mean, it's just exploring, but you have to be a little bit deliberate about it. The Void, but IMAX VR, instead of going to the Grove, to the regular cinema, why not walk around and go to IMAX VR and check out what's there? Do it once a month, do one or two of those experiences, because it's almost impossible to explain the experience. I just played raw data with a friend of mine from Australia, and he's heavily into esports and data. And I said, look, I'm bringing a sports experience into location-based services. And I try to explain the cinema model for sports and for music, and those two traditionally don't connect. So I take him into IMAX VR, and I said, okay, the big revelation. And we played raw data for hours. And the other thing is just get one of these. I mean, this is entry level. It's $100, $125. Sometimes you get it for free. Play around, because then your brain starts to understand on a very rudimentary level what happens when you film something in 360.
Right.
Yeah, from a technology standpoint, I think the biggest thing will just be this, because everyone has a smartphone already, and the headsets are getting cheaper and cheaper for them, and they work really well. And kind of what you're doing for the back-end streaming stuff is a big part of that too, where you might not have to take the leap to buy it or even go to the IMAX VR or wherever. It's already in your pocket. And I think the truth is if we look at those numbers, about the number of people who've tried Google Cardboard or have a Gear VR headset, those are big numbers already. And they're going to get bigger and bigger. So the mobile adoption, before the future stuff is democratized, it's going to be this. And his streaming technology type of stuff, back-end stuff, is the big question for a lot of people, is how do you get that content to it. But I think once those technical challenges are kind of locked down, how can you push enough pixels over LTE to make it work? This is the thing everyone already has. And in the future, I think some of this will merge a little bit, and hopefully we'll have these crazy glasses that do everything for us, and we don't need a phone. But right now, that is the hack. And people who are into it, you kind of get a little jaded. But if you see somebody's first time even doing a Google Cardboard thing, they're blown away. And so I think it's not. I mean, how should we make it better? Just make better stuff, because it'll happen. I think it'll happen.
Yeah.
I think it's already happening, and maybe that's just because I'm a believer, but it really isn't a question. People have this logical fallacy of what's the killer app, and there is no killer app, it's a platform. But what's the killer app for web? Well, if you like shopping for clothes, that's your killer app. If you like watching YouTube videos, that's your killer app. So yeah, going forward, there's a lot of that.
But even more so, it's the phone, because like having now been like 10 years with a smartphone, we're just the average people, not us. This is the choir here. But the average person being able to interact like that can now actually understand what VR could be and could do. VR's been around for 30 years. Yeah. In the present form. So that will be it. I mean, I think AR Kit and actually the new Apple phone, even though a lot of people are like, oh, it only does emojis, but I think people need to just have like a little bit at a time so that they actually see how this can work and start to get acclimated to functioning.
And particularly on the AR side, there is a gradual movement into it. Most people don't even know that they're using AR like frequently.
And AR is going to bring us back
and that's
to
fine,
VR.
because that's the best way probably to get that adoption, because then it's about the experience, whether people like it or not, but not about the technology. VR is a little bit more challenging because you need to put a headset on, because you need that exclusion from the existing environment. But even that is going massive. It's going so fast now because the next generation of headsets being released, like the Oculus thing, those are standalone headsets. No tethering, no phone. So you literally put it on, you're in VR, it's super easy, it will run your updates, all of that. So it becomes easier and easier.
And one thing too, the name of this talk is AR, VR, MR, and I really hope for a world where we just don't say that anymore, and it's not AR, VR, MR, XR,
start with scrapping MR.
4D. It's just an experience, and when that happens, it'll also be less scary. When if my grandma already has a smartphone and she does an experience and she doesn't have to say like, I did the VR thing. It's just like, oh, I did something really cool.
And when that lines up, it'll just take off. It's like we can't say, oh, it'll be this headset or this piece of content. It'll be when a headset, a piece of content, and enough people have played with it a little bit that they can quickly understand it and don't have to go read the manual.
When someone played Pokemon Go, how many people who played Pokemon Go thought this is an AR experience, or how many people just thought this is
a fun game?
Yeah. So eventually, as this stuff becomes more common, I think that the whole mystique will just disappear.
It brings us full circle, and what you guys are producing are the seeds that certain ones will blossom, others won't, but they're the ones that are going to catch in the different segments, whether it's music, whether it's horror, what have you. And it will almost certainly start with mobile, just from a mass standpoint. I mean, the one-to-one marketing of dragging someone at the void is good, but that's not going to move the needle.
Right.
So it's what has to happen is the investment needs to continue, the experiments need to continue, the learning will beget content that will be compelling to some segment of the audience, and something will spark, and none of us will be able to predict what it is, and everything that will come that will be successful will never be spoken of at a panel because none of us have any idea what the magic answer is. But you have to keep working at it because someone will strike it.
I love that. We're full circle. That was great. Well, look, you know what? I think we have enough time for some questions. So, lots of questions. I love this.
The lady in the back.
And also say your name and your company, and then ask a question.
The lady in the black had her hands up for half an hour.
Oh, for half an hour. All right. Let's tell us your name and if you have a company and your question and to whom you want to ask.
It's, VR is great in terms of, I think it's wonderful in terms of like sports, how you travel lots, nature, etc. Because they want to look all around you. But from a writing standpoint, you want to keep your audience's brain in tune with where the action is. And you want to drive them in what they should be seeing, unless there's some kind of issue where they have to behind themselves to say, you know, something like that. So I can see that there is like a mixture that can happen in action movies. So my question is, how are you going to really monetize that in terms of the theater color relative to VR and the narrative?
Well, I would say individually. like we do right now. Like, I watch Netflix at home. I download a movie on Apple, on iTunes. I think the narrative is independent of the monetization. I think that if you do a quality piece of content, that you absolutely should monetize it, because right now it's a race to the bottom if you give away everything for free. And in terms of the narrative, just real quick, like, we wholeheartedly at Lightsail believe that you can give and seed attention, that there are frames within frames, that there is a section of the 360 that is always the most interesting thing to look at, and that we are pushing you subtly from those different frames within the frames, using sound, using blocking, using actors giving and seeing attention, that there are ways of doing it, that I can't control everyone. Someone might be looking at their feet the whole time, but they're missing the best thing, which is right in front of them. So, yeah.
I think it's probably your question splits in two parts, and I think the first part, on the creative side, it 100% depends, right? You now have full freedom to fully direct the viewer, just like you do in 2D. Right? There's nothing that says it has to be 6 degrees of freedom at all times. You can direct the viewer 100% if you want to, or 0. That's entirely your choice. And how you allow the end user to find its way is entirely your choice. It could be with hints, it could be with sounds, it could be pushing the viewpoint through the experience. Is 100% your choice. Now that you need to figure out creatively. Then the level of interactivity sort of starts to determine the kind of platforms you're going to be releasing it on. Do you need controllers? Do you need 6 degrees of freedom? Do you need a certain quality level? So when you start putting that in place to support the experience, you start getting answers on which platforms you start going on, how do you develop it, what kind of technology do you need to use. And that also starts driving sort of where you're going to have to release it. And then you get the question of monetization. Do those platforms allow you for monetization? And then you have to go full circle, because if the answer is, I can't really monetize this, then maybe you should do it differently, or accept you're not going to monetize it, right?
That's a great timeline, but I think back to sort of the beginning of your question, just write a good story that is all around, because some of the things what we're talking about is execution. So these, like, if we were to use traditional film as a model, you write a story and then a producer and a director, or that might be yourself too, but that's like another step. So looking at just what is a good story that can be told in an immersive environment.
You do it in plates.
There's
so
just multiple ways.
You have multiple cameras.
You hide.
No, hiding is the old-fashioned way. But we did an interview piece where we had lights, we had lightings, we had the crew, we had a cue person, and we had a talent in front of us. And we filmed the whole 360 degrees, and then we pulled all those elements out, and then we filmed again. And then every shot in 360 is a VFX shot because you're blending cameras together. So we just take the first shot with the first camera and the second shot with the remaining cameras and blend them together, and everything disappears except for the talent who's in perfect lighting. So
it also depends on what the story is. There's
Yes.
multiple ways to skin that cat,
Yes.
and it just depends on what literally do we need to see everything at once, or can we only see this at a time?
And then there are examples like the 24 VR experience was actually shot in 2D slates. So they shot, I think, 5 times 90 degrees, obviously with an overlap, and they put that together back in VR. There are some people that know a lot about this stuff. Talk with that guy here in front. But the other way, you go to a website like Radiant Images. They have everything from these things all the way. Radiant Images. They have everything from these things up to $1 million rigs, and just look at it, because some of them you'll be able to operate by yourself, and some of them you need a crew for.
All right, well, we'll go here and then
So I've got three to five of you fairly well. I'm going to give you guys a softball, but that I think would be interesting. Your favorite immersive experience could be AR, VR, MR, theme park. Your favorite immersive experience to date, and just start with you and go with that. And why? Yes.
I think I recently got the chance to experience, I don't know if you've done Lone Echo on the Oculus, and that was my favorite experience because it's a environmental storytelling piece where you're moving around with these two controllers and you're in a zero-G space environment in a spaceship, and you're actually pulling yourself around and floating, and grabbing. So it fixes all these issues with how do I get around, how do I move around, and maybe because I'm a space nerd, but it was the most convincing presence experience where I was truly in another place. Also, it does something that's very hard to do technically, which is you have arms and a body, which is a problem with a lot of VR experiences. You look down and it's gone, and you have that there. And that for me by far is the most amazing technical achievement so far in VR. And I encourage anybody who's interested to do it. If you're not into space, it might be a little bit boring, but one very specific thing they do that I don't see a lot is they have a scanner you're holding, and anything you scan in the environment, details come up on this little tablet, and the tablet's floating in space. You can grab it and move it, and it feels like something you could only do in VR.
You know what? We only have a couple more minutes left, and we got like 2 more questions. So we're going to have a little bit of time afterwards. We can go talk to everybody. So you'll have to use your imagination for the other 4. But let's get this person over here, and then you'll be the last question. Go ahead. Yeah, you. So, what's your name? Mm-hmm. Okay, your question?
Creative conversation. So for those room scale, immersive environments, where do you feel the opportunities would be? What kind of companies would be interested in room scale?
Do you mean from like an enterprise position?
Yeah, I mean, what kind of creative, adventures can you take different industries on? Or is there a particular industry that's interested in?
For certain training and remote work, I personally think things like surgery is really interesting. Mm-hmm. The medical fields, being able to collaborate remotely, being able to even just, you see, so we want to do a creative production meeting, right? Like, let's say you're out here, I'm in New York. We want to sit around a table. What we can do in VR versus, let's say, on a Skype or something like that, is I can see when I say, hey, what do we do this? And you go like this. I already know you don't like that idea. Like, so I already have we have all that information. So the ability to collaborate.
You can have infinite whiteboards in VR in room scale. So I could be drawing, our shot list or our storyboard in New York, and you can see it here in LA.
I can give you an utterly useless answer. I think there is a perfect application possible for pretty much any enterprise application. If you can't improve your process or your operations by using AR or VR, you're probably not thinking about it right. And industries like the military have been using it for literally 20 years. NASA is using it extensively, as we saw last night during the dinner. The medical industry is pretty forward with applications here. I'm personally doing sort of a side project for pediatric VR applications to help children deal with pain and anxiety and give them confidence during treatments. There's really nothing that I think you can't find a good use case for.
No, that's really good. And I have to apologize because we are out of time, but we do still have a couple minutes that you can come up and ask the questions directly. They just gave me the cut. I apologize. But thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody here and appreciate our panelists here. Let's give them some applause.